Welcome to the Commercial Sponsorship Online Training course. I will be your trainer. I'm Abby Pollard, one of the Marketing and Commercial Sponsorship Specialists here at the Air Force Services Activity. During this block, we're going to be discussing your AFI resources. Now, we followed the Commercial Sponsorship AFI 34108. That is all things sponsorship. My suggestion is that you pull that AFI, save it on your computer, and start highlighting some of the items that we do discuss throughout this entire training course, because those are items that have come up for me and other marketing staff members. We will be discussing other AFIs, but that's our key AFI that we do follow within commercial sponsorship. The first item to always remember about commercial sponsorship is that it is to help finance and enhance a program in our MWR programs. Their services, events, activities, programs in exchange for promotional consideration and access to the Air Force market for a limited time. In Chapter 1.2, this is an important chapter. I would suggest highlighting that. It's important to remember that MWR programs to receive sponsorship must be open to all eligible patrons, but does not prohibit you tailoring certain programs, i.e. for families, some retirees, single personnel. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the program is for families or single airmen. It's just tailored towards that. So like your Glow in the Park run is tailored towards a family, but it's open to all eligible patrons. For programs to garner sponsorship, they have to be open to all eligible patrons. So I get that question a lot with regard to utilizing sponsorship funds for specific group programs, because many installations misunderstand that AFI reference in Chapter 1.2, which I told you to highlight, and AFI 34108. We cannot get sponsorship for small groups. So if you have a small group event for single moms on an installation, that's not open to all eligible patrons because it's geared towards your single moms. So you can't garner any kind of sponsorship for that. Now, when we discuss what sponsorship can be used for, this is in Chapter 1.4. Commercial sponsorship discusses just that in our AFI 34108. We get a lot of questions about FSS facilities wanting to use sponsorship, but unless it is an MWR activity, they cannot utilize sponsorship. So FSS encompasses a lot of facilities, but MWR is your morale, welfare, and recreation. So in Chapter 1.4, it states that sponsorship applies only to FSS activities, events, or programs defined as MWR. So other sections of the FSS, as well as Air Force organizations, units, private orgs, or unofficial activities, or organizations are not authorized to utilize commercial sponsorship. Now, that includes your airmen and family readiness. That's a huge question I get from multiple installations because Airmen and Family Readiness does programs and they're within the FSS, but they are not an MWR activity. Now later on, we will discuss donations and gifts to the Air Force, which is a completely different AFI. We'll reference that later. And other FSS activities and Air Force organizations are able to utilize that AFI to garner donations or gifts. Now, also other FSS activities like Airmen and Family Readiness Center cannot partner with the FSS to garner sponsorship, and that's a huge one that I get from installations where they're trying to switch up a program to make it a MWR program so that they can garner sponsorship. It has to be a true MWR program to garner those sponsorship dollars. Chapter 1.3 in our AFI 34108, it's important. This chapter is very important because it discusses membership drives and Air Force open houses. Membership drives are Membership drives over extended periods can be treated as events for sponsors, support and recognition purposes. However, sponsored displays can only be authorized at specific events during those drives. Sponsorship may support all Cat C programs and MWR elements of Air Force open houses. We'll discuss that in the Air Force open house section of this training, so we won't go too deep into that one within this AFI resource. So now we're going to discuss a little bit about Cat A's, Cat B's, and Cat C activities. Just as a little reference for you, you don't have to necessarily know too much about this, but it's a good reference within our AFI for you to understand what can and cannot be utilized with regard to sponsorship at these activities. So a Cat A facility is supported almost entirely by AFI or APF funds, which is your fitness programs, your parks, your libraries. Your Cat B facilities are supported by APF funds, but also generate your NAF funds. So those are your CDCs, your youth programs, your community centers, and then you have your Cat Cs. Those are revenue generating facilities supported solely on their NAF funds. Those are very limited APFs. So you have your lodging, your club, your rec lodging, your air clubs, programs like that. Now, Cat A's and B's, which are APF funded facilities, those programs may accept sponsorship provided the sponsorship is for enhancement, expansion, or cost and reduction for the customers. It's not used to offset any kind of budgets. I referenced that previously, that any sponsorship is not utilized to offset any budget or any normal day-to-day expenses. So as we continue Chapter 1, we'll now go into your responsibilities and approval levels. I'm going to briefly go over approval levels up here at the Air Force Services activity. This is information that you don't necessarily need to know, but it's a nice little bullet to have in your memory. The central funded sponsorship and donations, which are up here at the Air Force Services activity, anything over $100,000 goes straight to A1S, and anything below that is approved by the Air Force Services activity commander. So now we're going to move on to Chapter 2 of our AFI 34108. We'll be discussing all aspects of commercial sponsorship. There are two types of commercial sponsorship, unsolicited and solicited. So in Chapter 2.1, it discusses unsolicited sponsorship. This is entirely initiated by the prospective sponsor and their representatives. So it's not encouraged by FSS. So basically what we'll do as marketing staff members or commercial sponsorship coordinator, you will generate awareness for commercial sponsorship. For example, you'll do brochures, leaflets, ads in newspapers, trade publications. Those are ways of allowing for an unsolicited sponsorship to happen. Now, let's say you're at a facility or a business and you're just randomly talking about your program, and the business happens to say, wait, hold on, that's something that I would be interested in. That still can be considered an unsolicited sponsorship because you're not there specifically talking to the business about garnering sponsorship. You're just discussing an event, and it happens that someone that can possibly allow for sponsorship to happen overhears your conversation. So it's one of the most important things about unsolicited sponsorship is this is the only way that you are able to garner any type of alcohol sponsorship. You cannot go to an alcohol sponsor and request donations or any type of sponsorship. They have to come seek you out. It's the only way that you will be allowed. And also it's up to your commander on whether they will approve that type of sponsorship.